Are here today to talk about best-selling practices with Scott Margolius, the man, the myth, the legend from Feedback Repair, and hopefully he can tell us a lot of information about how to protect our accounts. I mean, that's ultimately the lifeline, and it seems like a lot of people are trying to get warnings and suspended and things like that. And a lot of it, I think, is probably due to the fact that we don't always follow the steps to protect our account. And that's one of the things that we had to really concentrate on early whenever we decided that, this is going to be a business. We're going to have people working for us, because as you grow in that capacity, you have to protect your account, because it's not just you anymore. It's all these people you have working for you that depend on you. And we try to be as diligent as possible. But even now, I'm still curious about the subject, because I want to protect our account even more than we do. And I don't feel like there's a much better person out there that can give us the information like Scott can. Scott's dealt with feedback. He's dealt with getting people reinstated that were suspended. And you're kind of like the jack of all trades, Scott. Every time it's like a weird question about an Amazon policy thing, I always tag Scott. And the reason I always tag Scott is he always seems to know the answer. So anyway, without further ado, here's Scott Margolius.
Hey, I appreciate that. Thanks for the introduction, for having me on. I will say, based upon what you just said, that if I say anything that does not seem to pass muster or doesn't line up with what you think to be accurate, please interject. Please either ask for clarification or say, hey, that's not quite the way that we see it in our experience or whatever. I want to make sure that the information that we provide today is accurate and actionable. So I don't want to be part of spreading any kind of misinformation or bad information. And so if you have anything that you want to add, please do.
Absolutely.
I've got a collection here of 4 or 5 different things that people have asked about in advance. So feel free to, if you have anything that you see come through that's relevant in the questions, or if you have any things that you want to touch on out of the gate, please let me know.
Absolutely, man.
So is there anything like that already, or should I just go ahead and jump in?
We already got a few questions up. The first question is, has something changed with the trend on IP infringement claims in the past year?
Absolutely. So, I think we all see that. Anybody who's selling at any kind of volume understands that clearly something has changed. Internal processes have changed. Enforcement efforts have changed. Something along those lines that is basically causing us to see a higher number of instances of these types of cases. So I would have to say that Amazon's continuing to improve their processes. They're continuing to do whatever they can to make sure that the buyer experience is awesome. They want buyers' expectations to be met. They want product quality to be top-notch, second to none. They want all these different things, and a lot of the responsibility to accomplish that is borne by the sellers. So if you're not equipped to do that, then you really have to be, if you want to be successful. If you want to be able to sustain your account on the platform, you really need to do what they're asking for, and probably more. This isn't really a place that I think, can be successful long-term casually. You kind of have to be all in. And so if this is more of a side income, it might not be the right fit for you. Other platforms might be better. Shopify might be better. eBay, Craigslist, Facebook, other online sites. I don't want to scare people off, but I do want people who are on the platform to be fully equipped to be successful there if that's where they're going to be. I don't think that this is like days in the past where it was super easy. This is a real business, and it requires real professionals, and that's what Amazon wants, and I don't think they're going to settle for anything less. So if you're not pursuing excellence in every area, you're probably not going to be able to, be successful long term.
One of the things we've noticed is over the past year, Amazon has made increasing efforts to give power to brands. Like they've wanted to start working with brands, and I think a lot of it originated with the Birkenstock fiasco that happened where Birkenstock was pulling off Amazon, and they realized there's a real problem, and the Amazon needs to start supporting these vendors. And this is the IP thing. It's become a lot easier to report people for IP infringement, which has led to a rise in IP claims. And now, per a few articles that have been surfacing here in the past few weeks, Amazon's starting to make changes internally to be able to be more efficient.
Right.
And anybody who knows or understands Amazon and has sold on there for any amount of time realizes that's how they do things. They rush out answers, and then they fix the process later. It's like they come to market quickly, and they've provided a solution for vendors or for the brands. Now they're going to provide a solution to make it better for the sellers.
Right.
So it's and it's not the end goal is just like you said. I mean, it's to make the market a better place. It's to make the market a better place for consumers, for brands, for sellers, for everybody. Like that's the way Amazon works, but it starts with the consumer. And whenever you give this power to the brands, that makes the consumer experience better because brands can theoretically verify that the product's real and the consumers are getting the products that they actually order.
Sure. And I think the easiest way for Amazon to accomplish that is in some ways a top-down type of relationship where they're reaching out directly to brands and they're, gating brands and they're providing more power to brands. And I applaud them for doing that. I'm just not so sure that it's being accomplished in all the right ways, and certainly has some damaging effects as well. Basically, everything that you just said, I think those are things that we've observed and sort of know to be true anecdotally. I had a conversation recently with a seller who's got like 250,000 lifetime feedback, and he's got quite a few products. He's a private label seller. He's got one SKU that he's sold over 100,000 of that SKU, and another one he's sold over 150,000 of that SKU. And he basically confirmed the exact same thing, not just what we've observed, but the fact that he knows these guys who are on the inside, and he's essentially said they roll these things out, and then they wait and see what it does, and then they take action after the fact to sort of shore everything up and put different processes in place to be able to accommodate the traffic and prevent things from happening that they see that occurred after they rolled it out. So the enforcement effort is always a little bit behind because they don't know what they're going to encounter yet. And instead of sort of trying to foresee all the different problems that might come in to effect or might affect the marketplace, they just wait for the problems to happen. They categorize them all, and then they go back in and fix them. And that's why you see these sort of ebbs and flows with seller performance and enforcement efforts.
I mean, it's effectively everything they do is in live beta because their goal is to be fast to market. I mean, the same thing was true with brand gating. If you remember when brand gating came out, it first appeared, it was wildly inconsistent. Like you could submit it and then submit it, and the third one, it's all the same, and the third one gets through for no reason.
Right. And
there was no rhyme or reason to it. Like now, if you go through that process, it's a lot more streamlined. Like if you provide them the information they need, you get through every time, and it's consistent. So, again, that was just where they rushed it out. I think that's going to actually get bigger this year too, with the new Brand Central that they've mentioned a few times in the press. That Brand Central is going to become a real thing where brands can register without actually selling on Amazon.
Sure, and I think they're really trying to ramp up that effort and court those types of people to come onto the platform and be engaged in that way, even if they're not going to be sellers themselves. I mean, we see things going that direction. The stuff that we see specifically for the IP infringement, the rights owner infringement, all of that, I think that there are a number of things that are happening there, and one of them is it's a little bit of an overreach. I mean, they're making some mistakes, and there are ways to fix it, but even if we were to share with them what we think the best practices are to fix it, it doesn't mean they will, right? Yeah. And I think they're trying to prevent counterfeits from being on the platform. They're trying to make sure that everybody who's selling every product that they have listed for sale, that they have authorization to do so. Because that authorization, if they receive that authorization directly from the manufacturer, there's a much greater likelihood that that product as new, real, and genuine.
Right. I mean, it accomplishes several things. I mean, that's the beauty of the system is once I feel like they get it resolved and streamlined to where it's not being used as purely as a weapon. Then I think it does accomplish a lot of the things that they actually want to accomplish. So is there a way that you would suggest that sellers protect themselves against IP rights infringement notifications?
Well, the absolute number one thing that everybody can do that I try to tell everybody who will listen, but most people don't want to hear, is that you need to be authorized to sell absolutely every product that you have in your inventory. And then they say, well, I could list it. It was okay to list it. Amazon said I could list it. It wasn't in any of the lists of products or manufacturers or brands that are restricted. Amazon let me list it, and then I got this complaint. Well, if you don't have authorization, then you don't have authorization, and you shouldn't be listing it. Just because it was okay to list doesn't mean you should.
Right. I mean, I think that's a great point, because you see a lot of people who get the cease and desist or whatever, and they, the main question is I contacted Amazon and they said that any complaints would come through me. What people don't realize is the complaints that come through Amazon come in the form of warnings and suspensions. Like that if Amazon receives that complaint from that manufacturer or that vendor, you will be issued a warning or a suspension. That one of the two. There is no in between. So, whenever somebody sends a cease and desist, I feel like that it's actually a courteous thing to do. They're actually doing something.
Absolutely. This is your opportunity to jump in there, get it taken care of immediately. Don't say, oh, well, I'm going to wait till I hear from Amazon before I do something about that cease and desist. If there's smoke, there's fire. You better jump in there and do something about it immediately. But that's even after the fact. The first thing you should do is go through all of your inventory with a fine-tooth comb and liquidate or remove absolutely everything that you don't have authorization to sell.
And this is from the perspective of protecting your account. I mean, that's
absolutely. I will say I'm ultra conservative on that, because I don't like seeing people get their accounts suspended for no reason when we know what to do to prevent it.
Right. I mean, for what it's worth, I tend to agree with you, and it's even though that viewpoint is very unpopular, for the record. I would say it's a shared viewpoint, and it's very unpopular for both of us, because if you look at it from our perspective, we understand that we can make money doing arbitrage. Like, we did it for years successfully, made lots of money. I mean,
absolutely.
Do you know why we don't do it?
Too much risk and too much trouble.
Right, and it's because if I go out there and I get a product, there's outside of being brand restricted showing up on my phone when I scan something, there's nothing telling me that I'm going to get an IP infringement notification or warning or a claim, and then you're at the mercy of God. I hope these receipts go through. God, please, dear Lord, let these receipts go through so I don't get my account suspended. And I never want to be in that situation, because we focus on having a business that's going to produce not today, but 5 years from now, 10 years from now. That's our goal, is we want to have a long-term business. And so I agree with you 100% that you should take a hard look through your inventory, and you should start really buckling down and focusing on getting approved for products.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, here's the other thing is the rigors and the discipline and the processes and the focus, all the things that you guys have in place right now to be successful will sustain you if, for instance, Amazon dried up.
Yep.
If Amazon dried up tomorrow, or they got rid of third-party marketplace sellers tomorrow, whatever, anything can happen. You guys have a business. You have all the different things in place to be able to effectively sell your products in other ways.
Right, we're approved to sell on every other marketplace. I mean, we don't very much, but we are approved to sell, and I could easily move my inventory over to Walmart or Jet or eBay or any of the various markets. There's so many marketplaces now, it's actually ridiculous. There's one that is really aggressive right now. Keep sending us emails. I forget what they're called. But I mean, there's a lot of places to sell your product, and that's what you said is the truth. If you're an authorized seller of a given good, then it's a business. Like, you have a business, you have agreements in place that allow you to sell that product. And it's very, that part is valuable, but it's also a wonderful security blanket.
Absolutely. And the trouble is, as you said, obviously RAOA, they're lucrative. It's lucrative. So is drop shipping. Guess what? I don't view any of those as particularly good for Amazon. You can do that almost any other platform. But on Amazon, what I see from somebody who handles account reinstatements and ASIN reinstatements all the time, the majority of account reinstatements, the majority of people I see suspended or have listings suppressed, it was RA, it was OA, it was drop shipping. And I'm saying at least 60 to 70%. I don't have a running tally. I'm just saying anecdotally from the number of people I've helped, it's come from those sources. Amazon's not saying you can't drop ship. Amazon's saying you can't do RA and OA. It's just those are the results of that kind of sourcing. And don't get me wrong, I've done it all. I started out with RA, OA, wholesale. I've done every single type of way that you can source and sell on Amazon. And I just don't view those as viable anymore for the long-term health of your account for most people. Some people get away with it just fine. I mean, I understand that. And they're never going to quit. They're doing great. They're, multi-million-dollar a year, and that's fine. Maybe they've figured out how to do it. Most casual sellers or even professional sellers might not be as safe at being able to do that. Those guys who are doing that, millions a year, RA and OA, they've got a niche. They've got a specific expertise. They've got specific processes in place to prevent the kind of things that normally apply to most people.
Sure. And this is something I've noticed, and I think it's true. Maybe you can comment about it. It's the more in sales you do, I don't feel like it buys you extra leniency. But a strike means less if you're doing lots of sales. Like you get one of these strikes, and it's think of it in terms of if I've done 10 orders and I get an inauthentic claim, like that, proportionally, I've not sold very many products. I'm very likely to get suspended right there. Now, you see people where they get the IP warning, and then you see other people get the IP immediate suspension on their first one. And I think it has personally to do with the amount of total sales that they've done. And it's not that they're getting more, it's per, let's say on average. Like as long as you're under an acceptable percentage, or as long as you have it, there's got to be some sort of leniency there with percentage for sellers.
I think that there are a number of different variables that are taken into consideration. It's kind of like the buy box algorithm. None of us know exactly how it works, but we know a lot of the variables that are taken into consideration for the buy box. And it's kind of that way for account health. So I've narrowed it down to a number of buffers that I think are in place, right? The people who are the very largest, who have dedicated account reps who are, over 15 million and higher, they don't have quite as much to worry about as most sellers because they have the buffer of a dedicated account rep. If you have around 6 figures of a loan from Amazon or higher, where it's big enough that you have a loan officer, that's another buffer because you have an additional person who gets CC'd on all of your important correspondence from Amazon. That person is an insider who may have the ability to help you. I've certainly seen them able to help people even get reinstated on occasion. If you're somebody who's a seller who's been recruited to the platform because of the type of products that you have that are unusual that Amazon wants, I've seen that recruitment process and having that contact of somebody inside Amazon who brought you to the platform be helpful to get you reinstated. I've seen situations where people who have aged accounts, so basically 2006 or so and before, who have daily payouts, a lot of those accounts have a little bit of a buffer in place because Amazon bots don't crawl those accounts the same way as they crawl most of our accounts. Then there's other things like number of transactions that are successful. I see a little bit more leniency for some of my larger clients where, okay, this guy's got 23,000 lifetime feedback. He gets away with stuff that I don't really expect most people would be able to get away with. That doesn't mean that I would take advantage of it. It just buys you a little bit of time to be able to fix it before they, throw down the hammer. Those kinds of things.
Absolutely. One of one of the sellers that we know that he did about $50 million. I mean, Amazon suspended him. So I mean, you're talking about they will suspend those bigger sellers. It's just that
Sure.
they have, the percentage, the sheer volume of orders means they, theoretically they can make more mistakes and still be under that, whatever that target percentage is that Amazon has. Like if it's
Absolutely.
0.5%, like if you've done 100,000 orders, you get a few more mistakes than if you're doing, 10 orders, 100 orders.
Right.
So,
but I mean, Chad Rubin got suspended just like that, just because of a problem with his credit card. There are different aspects. There are, maybe 6 different sections of seller performance that are looking at different things in different ways. And if you get tangled up with the wrong one, and they're not necessarily looking at your metrics, but they're maybe looking at some other aspect of your account, like they see some strange activity. It looks like you might have a duplicate account, or it looks like maybe your account has been transferred. Maybe there was a business transaction and you're no longer running your account, and somebody else is who bought your account. That's a different, investigations unit that's part of seller performance, and they might be flipping that switch to cut you off in a completely different way than based on just your metrics, just your performance.
Sure. I got another question here. A big request from brand partners is map enforcement. Some on the forum have recommended advising brands to claim infringement when map is violated. What is your opinion on this?
So can you nutshell that for me?
Okay, so what he's saying is he's seen several people suggest to brands that they should claim infringement on map violators. What is your opinion on that? I have a very strong opinion on this too.
Infringement on map violators.
I think it's absolutely insane and egregious for that to happen, but it is happening.
Well, first off, I agree with you. I think it's absolutely insane and egregious to make that suggestion to a vendor, because they're equally insane if they actually do it, because that's illegal. I mean, that's 100% illegal. It's a violation of, first off, that's price fixing. It's actually enforcing your map policy. Map policies are legal in that they can choose not to sell to you. They are not legal in that they can actually enforce them.
Right.
Actual enforcement is price fixing. And again, they're actually, for what it's worth, whenever I've legitimately attained or gotten products, regardless of what Amazon does, Amazon can suspend me for an IP rights infringement. I can get back. I mean, as a seller, you will get back from that. Like, assuming you don't do it all the time or it's not a recurring problem. You can get back, you can get reinstated. But it is illegal for that brand to do it if you are actually not violating their intellectual property. And selling a product below map does not violate intellectual property. So
well, here's the problem, though, is Amazon's made it possible for people to do that. They've given people that mechanism. And so you've got the difference between that which is truly illegal and that which is Amazon illegal.
sure.
And they're not the same. And so I've started to offer map enforcement for some larger clients and manufacturers. I would never do that, right? Because I see what happens to sellers. I don't want to send you some sort of notification that says that you've got an IP rights owner complaint without giving you every opportunity in the world to come into compliance. And I certainly don't want to advise a client that they should do that to you when it's inappropriate to do so. We're going to find another way to accomplish that. That's legal and moral and ethical.
But I mean, for what it's worth, Richard, on that one, it is 100% against the law to do it. To claim somebody is infringing on your intellectual property rights in doing it, making that claim when it's not actually true is illegal. I would highly advise not to do it. And if they're crazy enough to do it without checking with their attorneys, I mean, they deserve potential impending lawsuits that are going to happen against them.
But the problem is it's happening left and right? And the other problem is that it's going to cost you money to defend yourself. You're going to have to pay a lawyer if you want to pursue it that way instead of the other mechanisms that might get you out of that sort of situation. it's one of those things that you are going to deal with. You're going to, as of right now, until things change, until Amazon fixes that and makes that more difficult to make that kind of a claim against a seller, you're going to deal with it. It's just a fact, unless you go back and get authorization to sell every product you're selling.
Sure.
That's the solution. If you have authorization to sell every product you're selling, you don't have that problem. Other than people who are doing it inappropriately, competitors, for instance, but it makes a whole lot easier to defend when you say, here's my invoice and here's my authorization from the manufacturer. It goes away pretty quickly and pretty easily.
I've read that Amazon's opening up the DMCA counterclaim.
That's awesome. I'm glad to hear that.
Which will, once that actually happens a couple of times, that will make people a lot less trigger happy for claiming that that rights have been infringed upon and stuff like that, especially if they don't own the brand. Like, no, you start getting DMCA counterclaims, and you can end up having to defend yourself in court for making the claim.
I think that's wonderful. I think that really is going to make a difference if they go ahead and roll that out systematically.
I mean, they actually, I think they do it with a Nero program on, or is it Vero?
Vero.
On Nero's such a cool. That name is way more cool. They should have went with Nero, but Vero on eBay, I'm pretty sure, has the DMCA counterclaim thing.
They should call it the Karma program.
Karma, heck yes, that'd be a great one. Another question here is multi-pack as actionable violation or infringement. How common? What I think he's trying to say here.
Sure, it's that multi-packs, each thing multi-packs, I believe, are considered violations or infringement. How common do you see that reported, or warnings or suspensions for that sort of thing?
Well, let me just say I've never seen it, but that doesn't mean that it couldn't happen.
So So you've never seen a claim against a multi-pack or bundle item?
Never. Doesn't mean it couldn't happen. Doesn't mean it wouldn't happen, but I wouldn't want to sort of risk it and try to get away with it, but at the same time, I've never seen it.
Rich said his recent experience, he actually, that was what he was suspended for, was a multi-pack.
Never seen it. Okay. So, hey, you won the lottery.
Congrats.
Multi-packs, I think, would be super unlikely to ever see it happen. But like with bundles, I imagine with the way things are going right now, you can see that more often, where one brand does not want its product to be associated with that of another brand in a listing type thing, and that they'll try to follow suit to get that taken down in some way. I can definitely see that happening quite a bit. With multi-packs, I think you can run into situations where I think what maybe you can really get in trouble for there is less doing the multi-pack and more screwing around with the UPCs and things like that on that is where you can.
I mean, when you start screwing around with the UPCs, Amazon can legitimately verify it versus GS1, right, and that can cause a whole heap of problems. Joe, I'm reading my phone. He said he wasn't going to be able to make it live, and he wanted to ask this. Does it help to close or delete listings if you're no longer selling those items anymore versus leaving them open and closed out of stock by default? So should you delete and archive your listings?
Everybody will listen. I tell them that's what they should be doing.
Yeah. I mean, that's a process we actually do quarterly. We have a VA who, if we've not stocked a product in over a month, deletes it and removes it, deletes it and archives it. And then if we want to, if we ever carry that item again, we'll actually create a new listing for it.
I'd rather see you do it more than quarterly.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. Yeah, we probably should, but I still, and I'm with you. I actually feel like it's probably not enough. But it was one of the processes we put in place, and it's partially because some of our vendors had longer lead times and things like that. So we didn't want to do it monthly because there's a chance that I don't want to be making a new listing for the same product all the time.
Well, you could sort of keep your own record of that product, right? You could have something offline like Google Sheets or whatever, where you keep an exact, all the information about that listing, right? And then you could have a list of all of these different products that are similar that you've done that sort of same thing with that you keep in Google Sheets. So some of those types of products aren't nearly as likely to result in issues, and you kind of begin to know what those are. Things that are, not likely to become restricted, things that you have authorization to sell, those aren't nearly as concerning. It's the ones where, you happen to have a Nerf gun in your inventory and that became illegal in the state of New York, and so they restrict you from being able to sell anything like that, or, weapons or hazmat or all kinds of different
one of the recent ones, there's the laser lights.
Yeah.
Thing with the laser light. We used to carry a golf item it helps your golf swing, and it had a laser light on it. And where we'd stopped carrying that, we actually got a warning on it. It was like
tactical gear. I've sold a lot of tactical gear, and I've gotten rid of all of that out of my inventory because unless I'm going to be selling it, or unless I know that I'm going to replenish it, there's no reason to have that risk of having that product in your account.
Next question was, any idea when they might be fully implementing the new Brand Central? There's no way to guess that with Amazon. I mean, that's they had said, I think they said something like summer of 2017.
Right.
But that could be it could be tomorrow, or it could be a year from now.
I saw some follow-up questions to the previous. I wanted to ask you guys. I saw it in the chat. One of them is there a way to identify items that have not been sold or in stock within the past 30 days so I can identify them for deletion?
Yes, you can sort your inventory that way, through the interface that they give you in Seller Central when you go into Manage Inventory.
Yeah, it's through the Manage Inventory view, not the Manage FBA Inventory view. And you sort it by, I think you can sort it by the last time it was in stock, or something. There's one of the settings that lets you sort it, and you can go ahead and start killing them there.
You want to be really careful when you're doing it, right? There's a certain way to do it, and that is you want to make sure that you filter it and you don't, delete anything that's stranded, and you don't want to delete anything that's suppressed. You want to take care of those things first because it's a much more difficult process to sort of delete those from your inventory and then go back and try to fix it after the fact. So everything that's stranded and suppressed, you want to fix those first, and then you want to sort for, let's say, anything that's in transit to FBA. You obviously wouldn't want to delete that. You don't want to delete anything that is maybe seasonal. Maybe you don't have it in stock right now, but you're going to, so you want to take that into consideration. There are a number of different things that you want to make sure to not delete, and it's not just based upon whether or not you're out of stock and it's been X number of days since you last had it in inventory. But after you do all that, I would say absolutely get rid of that stuff. Now, you might want to do it through a feed, through an upload, because if you've got 1,000 or 4,000 or 15,000 items in your inventory, to go through that manually 100 at a time is going to be a nightmare. So you might be better off doing it through a feed update.
We actually did it the first time we did it. We had it's from our RA account. I think we had something like 17,000 items that we ended up having to slaughter off. And we didn't do it through a feed, and it took forever. Actual forever.
So, if I tell somebody to do it and I can just hear or see their eyes glazing over, it's usually because of that. It's like, I don't have time to do that and all the other stuff I'm doing. How on earth could I pay attention to something like that? Because it's not urgent. It's not sexy. It's not going to necessarily make you money, but it is really important.
It's one of those things. It doesn't matter until it does. But when it does matter, it is, it's too late.
And it's a great task for a virtual assistant, too, to help them to look at your account and manage things like that.
That's one of the reasons I'm partnering with Quincy Lynn to be able to offer those services, so that any kind of thing like that, account health and maintenance types of services that need to be done, we'll be able to provide a resource to accomplish that for you.
Yeah, Quincy's got a bazillion VAs. Bazillion VAs.
Another follow-up was, if you delete an item in Manage Inventory, do you also need to delete it in FBA Inventory? And Dan answered that as a yes.
So it's archived and Manage FBA Inventory.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then, isn't archiving still keeping it on your account was another question.
It never goes away. Even if you delete it from your inventory, Amazon can see that you've sold that product.
They can, but I really prefer to delete it, because if you delete it from your inventory, I feel like time and again let's say I'm working on a reinstatement, right? And I say, hey, you need to go back and grab that inventory and make sure you delete it. And then not only do you delete that, but it might be necessary to delete all other products in your inventory of that same brand. I've had people not delete them. They think that they delete them because they don't know what that means, or they don't think it's as important to do as I suggested. We submit the plan of action. Maybe we've submitted another plan of action. I say, hey, are you sure you deleted that? I've gone back into people's accounts. I can't tell you how many times. Find that same product still there. They never deleted it. We go in and delete it, and guess what? Lo and behold, they might get reinstated.
You can only delete it from the Manage Inventory tab. If you go to so what we do is we delete it from Manage Inventory, and then whenever you go to the FBA Inventory view, the Manage FBA Inventory tab, it'll show up with a, there's no listing for this item, red thing under it, and then we archive all those, just so you don't have to look at them.
Well, on some of those, sometimes I've found that if you go into the FBA inventory and it says there's no listing, you might actually have to create a listing and then delete it.
Sure.
But yeah, you're right. They can search everything. No matter whether it's deleted, archived, whatever, they can search everything that's ever been in your account. Any product you've ever sold, any email you've ever sent, any email you've ever received, feedback that's actually been deleted, not just crossed through. They can search all of that stuff. It's not a matter of whether or not they can search it. It's a matter of whether or not you're held liable for what that is. And I think if you're deleting it, then your chances of them holding you liable for it are much less likely.
Actually, I heard one of the most genius tips I've ever heard, and it came from you, about inventory or about feedback. And it was, whenever you get a feedback removed, you should keep a log of that feedback. You should keep it on a Google sheet somewhere so you can reference it later.
Absolutely. You have to do it. You have to, because sometimes that might be the only thing that unravels the performance notification.
Sure. And for what it's worth, if I don't know how many of these you went through with the product safety reviews or product safety complaints or whatever.
Right.
Sometimes those are damn near impossible, like, to figure out what it's going to, because they don't tell you. So you have to go through feedback on the product, or reviews on the product, and then you need to be able to go through your feedback. And if you just delete them and you don't keep that record of it, then it gets tough. I mean, you'll be looking for things for a long time trying to figure out what this actually goes to.
So let's talk about that, because that's a pretty good example. Let's say you got a product safety issue, right? I've had a couple different people ask me about it recently, and I've got 2 different notices from people asking about what to do with product safety. And the fact of the matter is, you can't write an effective plan of action for Amazon unless you know what the problem actually is. And so when they give you the heads up, they sort of expect you to know that or find out on your own. They know what the problem is, but you don't. So you got to figure it out. So the first thing we normally do is sort of a forensic analysis of the account. You've got to go through everything, and that includes your feedback, including your deleted feedback. It includes searching for that ASIN in buyer-seller messaging with the right filters on there so that you go back far enough to possibly capture that the sale of that product. Or it includes all of your returns, both MFN and FBA returns. It includes looking at the reviews for the product. And in one case, I mentioned to somebody today, they didn't know what the problem was, but they had received some information about the issue itself. They'd only ever sold one of them. Well, that's pretty helpful, because you can sort of narrow it down pretty quickly. If you've got one sale, one return, one complaint, they said, hey, they never returned it, the buyer never returned it, you can either look through all of those different places I just mentioned to be able to find any potential issues that were mentioned. In this case, it was a product safety complaint for a product that they purchased through liquidation, health and personal care. So does anybody see any problem with purchasing health and personal care, beauty, or grocery from a liquidation source?
Seems like a bad idea.
It seems like a pretty bad idea to me. I've seen a lot of suspensions from that. Please stop that immediately. So in this case, the answer for them might be call up Amazon, talk to seller support, give them the order ID, let seller support know, hey, you've reached out to this buyer through messaging 3-4 different times and haven't heard a single thing. You're not able to find out exactly what the buyer, what their concern was about this product. Hey, seller support rep, is there any way you're able to let me know maybe some comments that you see about that particular order that I can't see? Those are called the annotations that are on your account that are on the back side that contain information that you need in order to resolve it, because if you can't see it any other way, it's really important to find out exactly what that buyer said so that you can have an appropriate response.
Absolutely. For what it's worth, if you remember, those came out in a big wave last year.
Yeah.
Product safety complaints, and whenever they were introducing that new dashboard.
Right.
I don't know if it's going to happen again. We had 3 come up over the weekend.
Wow.
We addressed all of them today. I've got reauthorized to be listing the products. And we had that and one authentic complaint over the weekend.
Wow. Well, part of it is you got to fix the problem. You see that happen. Let's say you're a private label seller and that product's super important to you. Just getting reinstated to sell the product again doesn't fix anything. Yep. You got to fix the problem. I had one client who had to recall 15,000 units from FBA to fix the problem. You better be ready to go to town to do whatever is necessary to fix it.
Yeah, that's brutal right there. So Parrish says, on the flip side, if you have someone committing IP infringement on a product that you have exclusive rights to sell, how do you protect your interests against those who don't have authorization to sell that product and send them a cease and desist? You can take that one if you want, or I can take it.
Well, one of the things I would say is I'm not a real big fan of sending a cease and desist through buyer messaging. I think that presents problems for you as a seller. So that said, go ahead and take it from there if you want.
Sure. I'm with you. I always suggest that people do not contact another seller. Just don't do it. Never do it yourself. Whenever we have a problem, we have a cease and desist that we give to some of our vendors and tell them to run it by their attorneys, and if they like it, by all means use it. And we also have an instruction sheet on how to send a buyer message.
Right.
We them send the buyer messages because it's not it's not coming from us. That way they can do it whenever we might say, hey, this guy's not an authorized seller or breaking your map or whatever the problem is, and they can send that message to her if they so choose. So I would first off, I would never ever send that cease and desist. Secondly, it's not your exclusive rights to sell a product doesn't mean that somebody is violating intellectual property rights by selling it alongside you. The first sale doctrine. I'm not an attorney for what it's worth. Scott's also not an attorney as far as I know. But the first sale doctrine says if I get that product legally through legal channels, I'm allowed to sell that product as long as it's unchanged. So as long as I'm not making changes, you're exclusive. That's the thing about an exclusive. Is an exclusive is only as valuable as your ability to enforce it. Now, and the brand's ability to enforce it. So that being said, I wouldn't necessarily assume that they're violating my IP rights so much as you want to educate your vendors on better supply chain practices so they know who that seller is and can start eliminating that flow of product. Because they may very well not be violating the intellectual property rights of that company.
Right. Sometimes it's challenging, I think, to think through all the different things that you could or should do or may not want to do in a situation like that because it seems kind of abstract and kind of like uncharted territory. But I think it'd be instructive if you were to begin to think of it as you are fishing in somebody else's pond and you have authorization from the landowner to fish that pond. Not everybody else gets that same authorization. So if you're fishing the pond and you see somebody else show up and start fishing, what do? If you have 10 other people show up and start fishing, that answer might be different than if you have one other person show up and start fishing. So how do you address that? How do you address that? There's some legal things you can do. There's some other things you could do. You might just be exceedingly thankful that you're only having to share the pond with one other guy. You know, you have permission from the landowner, and so it gives you somewhat exclusive territory, and it's very valuable and beneficial. And if you have to share it with one other guy who's not authorized, then, hey, maybe that's not that bad. But if you want to press the issue, there are probably some certain things that you can do, either through legal means or otherwise.
Right, but the main thing is, I think you take that to the brand owner and let them handle it directly. Like you can suggest it, you can suggest whatever route you want, but make sure you do it through them, not through you. Don't ever act on their behalf, and never contact another seller. Like that's
ultimately it is the responsibility of the landowner or the brand owner.
I mean, the landowner, brand owner works the same here. When you get approved to sell products from each company that you sell their items, is it the same as applying to buy from the company at wholesale, or is this a different process? Well, here's the thing. A lot of companies, when you apply to sell their wholesale products, they may not ask if you sell it on Amazon. That is not, but whenever they say, yeah, sure, we'll open you an account, that is not authorization to sell their products on Amazon.
It's kind of it's like asking somebody if you can date their daughter.
Right.
Does that mean you can do all these other things? No, I just said you could take my daughter out on a date.
Right. Absolutely. So, I mean, make sure that the vendor knows. I mean, this is why we've been far more, whenever we first started, we didn't necessarily tell people where we sold products. We bought and we sold it. We learned that it's easier to develop. Number one is you develop better relationships. And then number two, it's a whole lot safer just to go ahead and tell them where you sell the product. And if they don't want to work with you for that reason, just find somebody who does want to work with you.
Yeah, you let them know who you are, what you're doing, what your seller name is, so they have that information on file. And it's really best to, when you get approved for an account, to get them to sign a document that says you're an approved seller in these marketplaces and your name is this on those marketplaces. And that's the best way so you have that paperwork and documentation, and as it meets Amazon standards, and that you always have that evidence that you are an approved vendor and that they know it too, and they agree that they know it.
Let me give you a relevant example. I recently went to a trade show and met a manufacturer and placed an opening order at the show, and he said, hey, by the way, thank you for that. I'm going to go ahead and put your name on my website as an authorized vendor, and I'm going to protect your territory as well, even though I don't have a physical territory per se, right? So I went ahead and placed that initial order. I listed everything for sale, but then I didn't list everything for sale because I had two different SKUs that I bought from him. One of the SKUs I went ahead and sent into FBA. The other one I held back, and that's because the listing itself wasn't right. I felt that if somebody were to try to purchase that second SKU based upon that listing, there'd be buyer expectations that weren't met because it wasn't the right color and the description was messed up. So I got a hold of the manufacturer, and I said, hey, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and fix this for you. In order to do so, I'm probably going to need to be authorized to do so, and I'm going to go ahead and get you brand registered in order to be able to have listing authority. And he said, that's fine. Go ahead and take care of it if that's what you need to do. I went ahead and took care of it, and I fixed the listing, and then I improved the listing, and I went back to him and then had a conversation about, what do you think about restricting the number of sellers that are authorized to be able to list this product on Amazon? And he said, sure. And he said, what do you recommend? And I said, well, I don't think you really need more than 5. And I basically ended up being one of the 5, not because I asked for it at the get-go when I shook his hand at the show, but because I had a little bit of a relationship with him and a little bit of trust and rapport. He ended up saying, hey, I'm going to go ahead and send out a press release talking about this most recent show and the developments of the product and that kind of thing. Would you mind looking it over for me? I went ahead and revised his press release for him and sent it back to him. There's this rapport that develops, and now I'm one of 5 authorized. I can go ahead and I've already placed my reorder. It's sold through quickly. It's relational. It's relationships. It's not just, I want to be your exclusive distributor and here's my list of reasons why you should do that and all the different things that are my value props. Trust comes a lot of the time not from what you say, but from what you do.
Absolutely. I think it 100%. I think actual trust comes from what you do. Like you can build expectations with what you say and get people excited, But when the rubber meets the road is whenever you actually do these things.
Yep. I mean, I recently brought on 15 new people, right, to help with the workload. One of those guys I brought on based upon my perception of his ability. The rest of them I've worked with previously to some degree. This guy, he's going to have to perform in order for me to know that I can trust him and keep him.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's all performance-based.
Got another good question here. What are the levels or stages of trying to get a good outcome on suspension issues? How long do you take to exhaust each one?
I mean, I've got one guy that I'm working with who's been suspended since before Christmas. I haven't given up on him yet. I think that there's still a potential light at the end of the tunnel, even though he's received his final wording that says you can't sell on here anymore and we're not going to respond if you contact us. I still think there's a possibility to get him back. I've certainly gotten other accounts back from that same situation before.
I've seen some come back from that.
Yeah, and you don't want to be in that situation. I wouldn't wish that on anybody. Sorry for the sweat. But it's challenging. There's no slam dunk for anybody who's suspended. Is the dirty little secret? If you told me that you got suspended over the weekend with all those notifications you received, I wouldn't tell you 100% will get you back.
No, I mean you still have to. Number one, you have to put in the work to find out what caused the suspension, and then you have to show a reasonable plan to fix the problems that actually caused it. A lot of that's, I think, a lot of suspension issues are being able to take blame that you caused something throughout. It could be something minor that you did a long time ago that just manifested in your account and then caused problems. And then eventually you run into that again, and it catches up to you, and you get suspended. So, but yeah, I mean, I think you can continue to go for a long time on those kinds of things.
Well, part of the problem is the bigger the account, sometimes the more problems that there are. Like we talked about earlier, you maybe of a certain size and the number of transactions and the few number of issues, you have a little bit of a buffer. But if all of a sudden there's something significant, those things could come back into play. And then because of the size of the account and the amount of complications involved, it becomes like peeling away the layers of an onion. So if Richard's asking about stages, there really are stages, but I look at them in terms of, okay, well, we got this fixed, and now we go on to this, and now we've got this fixed, and we go on to this. And half the time, you don't even know what all the issues are when you get started.
I definitely see that as a possibility. I can definitely, the more, that's the thing is, the more sales you do, I think you get a wider buffer to get, before you get suspended. But I also think once you do get suspended, there's more mistakes in there. Like the more sales you do, the more mistakes you're going to make, and the more things you're going to have to answer for.
Right. They might suspend you for X, but really they're not just concerned about X. They want you to answer that, but they really are concerned about Y, Z, A, and B that they don't tell you about because they don't even know that you're going to get far enough in the process to be able to have them tell you about that to uncover it, to fix it.
Right. Charles says, is it safe to say there's a less of a chance to get an IP claim if you're doing private label?
It depends how much research you did in advance to make sure that you have authorization to be able to sell, manufacture the product that you're selling. I've certainly seen that before.
I can tell you one thing about an IP claim with private label products. If you get one as a private label seller, you are hurting. Because it means you've generally violated somebody's patent, their copyright, or some form or fashion of actual real life IP.
Maybe, maybe not. It could be a competitor.
I mean, but you can get destroyed on those. Like that's the ones that actually can destroy you. So if you do private label, make sure you do all that research, and I would suggest getting a patent attorney to do patent research to make sure that you don't absolutely hang yourself at some point. I think wholesale direct from brand owner and with approval and private label are by far the safest methods.
I agree with that, but you still have to do it right. There are still no shortcuts.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of it's just following through with good process, like making you said it right. I mean, you take a shortcut, and that shortcut is literally you could be shortcutting yourself straight to the grave. Like
Pretty much. You invite all kinds of liabilities when you don't do it right, when you don't have the right inspection, when you don't have the right design, when you don't have the right packaging, when you cheap out and go with, something other than a GS1 barcode, or you use somebody else's images or somebody else's copy, or you don't make sure that the product that you're producing truly is, open domain. There are just so many different things to consider that it's not like these are headaches, it's just part of the process.
Here's a great question, and I'm excited to see Scott's answer on this one. I know it's going to be awesome. Regarding UPCs, if you list it against an existing listing that has been created with an incorrect UPC and brand name, can you be putting yourself or your account at risk even though you didn't create the listing?
All day long.
Oh, yeah.
All day long. You are responsible. They hold you responsible. It doesn't matter who created that listing.
It's guilty by association.
I mean, you are guilty. For what it's worth, you actually are guilty of this because you know that it was incorrect. You knew when it was incorrect and you scanned it and it came up. It came up with the wrong product or didn't match the product that you were trying to, the ASIN that you were trying to match against. You knew right there that there was a problem, and Amazon will absolutely suspend you for that. They will absolutely get you. For what it's worth, whenever you encounter something like that, you better make sure it gets resolved per GS1 standards and that UPC is correct.
You can get away with it a lot. You can get away with it all the time. There are all kinds of sellers that do, and I wouldn't say that a suspension is imminent if you have items like that in your account, but if they come across it, yeah, you're guilty. You're guilty.
Same thing. It's the same thing. Like when I come to work every single day, I speed every day. Every single day, I break the law, speed. And I don't get caught. That doesn't mean that it's not illegal. Like that's the thing is by doing something, by breaking the law, I understand that I'm breaking the law, and I understand that at some point I will get caught and I will have to pay a ticket. That's just the way. That's the way it works. And Amazon's the same way. You can break the law until they find out, and when they find out, you have to pay the piper. Like that's the way it works. So absolutely, I would suggest getting that fixed before listing against that product.
Julia asked, how do you archive and then delete? She says she's just been deleting.
I mean, I would just do the deleting, and then go back to your after you've deleted everything out. You can go to your FBA inventory view, and you can archive it there. Just the only reason we archive is so we don't have to see all the dead listings in the FBA view. Whenever we do spot repricing, we do it in FBA view, not manage inventory. That's a long one, Chris. It says, how do you do a feed update to delete and archive multiple listings? You can actually, I would honestly just go look for Amazon feed updates, and there's a guide about how to do it there.
Yeah, but you could put yourself in a lot of trouble if you're not careful. If you're not careful, you can create a whole can of worms that you don't want to deal with. So I would say be really careful. Like try it yourself and test it a few times on a few SKUs that you don't care about. or hire somebody to do it for you.
That's also a fair one. Under manage, yep, we already covered that one. David says you would be best to turn it back to the manufacturer if it is legal to do, if it dealing with legal issues, and have them handle a MAP violation. Would you not? Yes, absolutely. Paris said, I just deleted some products that I haven't sold in a while from my managed inventory section. It appears that they are automatically being deleted from my managed FBA inventory section since Amazon has launched their new beta version of these sections. You guys experience the same? Are those products properly archived in the FBA? Honestly, I haven't checked it. Like we have a VA that handles that process. I'll ask her.
It sounds right, though.
Right, it sounds right. So that's just one of those things where we don't necessarily do those things anymore. Follow up on the incorrect UPC question. How can you ensure that you have the correct UPC matching the listing?
The easiest way would just be scan the barcode on the product.
Right, and it should take you to that product on there. And then here's one of the things we had a student get suspended for this is the barcode did not match the GS1 listing, and she actually got suspended for it.
Wow.
So, that's one thing that we're starting to. We'd never considered adding that to our process to check UPCs versus GS1, but it's certainly one thing we're starting to consider that we should do. So
it's pretty obscure, but boy, that's kind of scary.
Well, she had 3 products like that. That just, and it was clothing items. Clothing items, there's a lot of things that are weird about sizes and UPCs with clothing, and they were definitely legitimate items, but she got suspended for them.
Right, it can happen, and it's not even malicious. It just happens. Like, especially like you said, with clothing or whatever, like there can be just products where someone is trying to bring it to Amazon, but they can't figure out what the UPC of it is or whatever because they don't have that materials with them or on them wherever they purchased it, so they just create one for it, and obviously that doesn't match the actual product, and that's how those things happen.
Right. I mean, there's so many different things that have been wrong or done improperly in the catalog that people have either done in error or on purpose, and you're sort of, what's that?
Typos even.
Yeah, anything. I mean, that's one of the reasons why, if you want to stay out of trouble, one of the things you have to do is to take physical possession of the product so that you can inspect it. This pen is really this pen, and it is an exact match against the product detail page, and if I scan the box that the UPC is an exact match, everything about the description is right. Okay, so you took physical possession, it's the right size, it's the right weight, it's the right color, everything about it is right. But the next thing you have to do is to be absolutely diligent to pay attention to ASIN change notifications, because I've seen this happen so many times. I sent this into FBA, here's my 1 pen sitting at FBA. The listing changes and somebody says it's a 2-pack or a 12-pack, but mine still says it's a single pack because that's what I listed against. I have a buyer buy it. They want it for 80 cents because that was my single pack that I sent in, but now it's a 12-pack. Mine's still listed at 80 cents. They expected to get a dozen of them for 80 cents. I'm the one who's responsible because I didn't pay attention to the ASIN change notifications. The other thing I've seen happen is the pen that I sent into Amazon is black. Somebody changed the listing to blue. I'm the one who's responsible because I didn't pay attention to the ASIN change notifications.
Yeah. Now, we actually have a file in the file section of the group that talks about ASIN change, what you should do with an ASIN change. And it goes through that process. So definitely download that. And he's right. I mean, you can a lot of the times when you send it in, it's correct. And then you get those emails. You should always check them. And you should go through. There's a process that we go through every time we get them, and we check off to make sure that our product is still matches that listing. And whenever you do that, let's say that you get an ASIN change, and your product, they've changed this pen to the 12-pack. What should you do? You should always shut down that listing immediately. Like shut down the listing and then worry about it. Like that's the first thing you should do is make sure people aren't buying that product thinking it's a 12-pack, or that it's some other product, or that the black pen is the blue pen. Like you should if your product does not match, shut it down. Like shut down close your listing. That's what it is. It's close
or suppress it, either way.
Right. Just make sure that customers cannot order it. So
yeah, we'll rapid fire the last few here. We just got a few more questions. So how can you fix a listing's UPC if you are not currently on the listing?
Why would you want to do that?
He's saying like if he's buying a product, what I think he's saying is if he's buying a product from directly from the manufacturer, he sees that there's a problem with that listing, how would he go through and make that change?
Open a case and submit proof.
Yep. That's always the answer. I mean, you can always make those changes
beforehand.
You're right. You can make those changes. You just have to be able to submit proof. Somebody said, "What is GS1?" How do you check GS1? You can go check their database. You just have to go to gs1.org, and you can check a UPC versus the database to see who it's registered to.
How does deleting listings impact reimbursements that you might be entitled to later?
You still have the orders. I mean, it's still an order in your order history.
So you can always wait X number of days, however it is that you need to, based upon whatever the issue is, and it's different numbers of days for different issues. You know, if you're waiting for a return to come in or whatever, and you can always, you know, let's say you have a process to wait 50 days or 60 days after every transaction to go ahead and go through and request all your reimbursements. You basically pick it up at that point.
All right. So, Scott, I think that's got all the questions. So before we hop off, can you tell us?
I've still got more.
Okay.
Only if you want to spend the time, though. Only if you want to spend the time.
Sure.
So what were you going to say before that?
I was going to, never mind. We'll jump into this.
Okay. So we said we were going to talk IP rights owner infringement issues, and I don't feel like we've done that adequately. So in this case, one of the TWF folks said, hey, why don't you go ahead and use this as an example, feel free. And it's basically, if you get one of these messages that says, we're contacting you because we received a report of copyright infringement from the rights owner listed below. Sellers are not allowed to create listings or detail pages that infringe copyright or remove the content listed at the end of the email. We may let you list again if we receive a retraction of the complaint from the rights owner. Their contact information can be found below. If the rights owner agrees to retract their complaint, they must send the retraction to us at notice-dispute@amazon.com. If you believe the report does not contain any sort of infringement, you may email notice-dispute@amazon.com with supporting information if appropriate. If the rights owner doesn't retract their complaint or you do not provide supporting information, we may provide your contact information to the rights owner upon request. We consider allegations of intellectual property infringement a serious matter, and your account is under review. You hear that? It's serious, and your account's under review. So you have to do something. You can't just ignore it or stick your head in the sand or whatever. If we receive more complaints about your listings, we may not allow you to continue to sell on Amazon.com, and they mean it. You can't ignore this stuff. So you've got to do something, and what is it that you do? So typically, I'll send you the template. Do you already have a template to respond to these?
We do have a template, but I mean, I'd love to see yours too.
Yours is probably fine. I mean, there's nothing special about mine. It's just it's just a response, and it responds to the rights owner. You get a hold of them, and you try to figure this thing out. You let them know that, hey, I have deleted all my listings. I'm sorry for selling your product without approval. I've deleted all my listings. I've deleted all of the listings for your brand, and you let them know that you're in full compliance, and you apologize. You would love to be able to sell their product with authorization, but you recognize that that's probably a different department. At any rate, you wonder if they're now satisfied with your compliance, would they remove the complaint? Go ahead and in order to do that, you send the notification to this email that Amazon provided. Could you please CC us when you do that? And you really need to send that email to them with tracking. Go ahead and identify yourself so that they know what your store name is, what your email address is that's associated with Amazon to use to log into Seller Central, and make sure you get a hold of them. You send it with tracking so you can tell if they're opening it or not, because you might do different things based upon whether they do or don't open it. If they don't open it, then you know that, hey, maybe they're not getting it. Maybe you need to send more. Maybe you need to look them up. Maybe you need to give them a phone call. Maybe you need to ask for the person by name. Maybe you need to get a different email address for them. Whatever it is, get a hold of them. Try to get them on the hook, get them to respond so that you can have some sort of interaction with them and see how they're going to proceed if that's something they're going to be willing to do.
For what it's worth, if you go through all those phases, like Scott said, you send them emails, you show that you can be able to show that you've sent emails, you've sent that certified letter.
Document all of it. Document it. Everything you do.
If they will not work with you, you can put that in your Amazon appeal that we have tried this. You can show Amazon that you sent a certified letter, that you've sent several emails, and the company's just not responding. Amazon can work with that and get you off the suspension because they see that you're actually making an effort, and it's that company who's not complying.
Absolutely. And the big thing is you got to do all that stuff first, and you got to do it immediately. Make sure you end your listings immediately. I think that, I have a sneaking suspicion that when you go in and end your listings or delete your listings, that Amazon sees that you're taking action. So you might have a little bit longer to reply, because what you really want to do is get them to retract that complaint, even when complaints are retracted, sometimes that still doesn't fix it. That something about it doesn't congeal in their system or whatever. And so you might have to say, hey, here's the notice of retraction. Could you please go ahead and fix this? And you do that by opening a case, perhaps. You include documentation of that as an attachment when you're replying to seller performance. Then once you've gotten the hold of them or gotten them to retract it, or they haven't been responsive or say that they won't retract it, you can include all the documentation of everything that you've done, and then you would perhaps reply to seller performance with a plan of action, POA, to let them know what you've done and let them know that you apologize and you're in complete compliance and you've taken care of that issue. The problem is Amazon might not believe you, because if you have a whole bunch of other products in your inventory that they know that you're clearly not authorized to sell, you're really not any better off. You've got this giant dam that's leaking and you stuck your finger in one hole. The whole thing's about to break because you haven't gone to the trouble to make sure that you're authorized to sell every single product in your inventory. That's why that's so important, among other reasons.
Absolutely.
So that's the sort of basically, if you send a POA and you've gone through all those other steps and you still aren't getting where you need to with Amazon saying, hey, the issue is resolved, then you probably need professional help.
Yeah.
Whether that's someone like a normal service provider or a lawyer, you probably need professional help at that point.
Right. I mean, that's one of the things is if you whenever things are in warning stage, if you get them resolved, Amazon's never going to tell you it's actually resolved. They're going to say, we've annotated your account, you're free to list these items, or they will give you an answer that sounds like, they don't really. I think it's funny. It's just funny that they never be like, hey, great job, thank you for getting us. You're never going to see that. Whenever you get a resolution from Amazon, it's going to be, we've reviewed the information and you are allowed to continue selling the product.
Maybe they might tell you that much. They might say, hey, thanks for your reply, and that's about it. I mean, it's so funny how little they tell you sometimes.
Yeah, we got those all today. We got all those responses of you're allowed to continue selling those products.
Which is what you really want to see, but that's not always what you get. I'll tell you, the majority of the services that I offer are ones that you can, as a seller, and should do yourself. You should try to fix things on your own. You should be proactive on your own. The majority of services that I offer are, if you don't want to do it yourself, if you want to pay somebody else to do it for you because you don't have time, or you don't want to spend the time to dig in and figure out what all the right solutions are, if you've already tried on your own and failed, that's usually where I would say, hey, maybe it makes sense to reach out to somebody else. But ultimately, I think every seller ought to be able to be equipped to do these kinds of things on their own.
I mean, it's definitely, all these things are possible. But here's the thing, and this is, somebody asked me, if you guys got suspended, what would you do? And I would hire somebody I would hire a specialist to deal with it. And there's a couple of reasons for that. First off, I'm excellent at writing appeals. I've helped a couple of our students with theirs. I'm very good at it. But the difference is, I don't need to be good this time. I need to be perfect.
Absolutely.
I need to get reinstated, and I don't need there to be any bones about it. And secondly, and I think this is one of the most important aspects, is somebody that does this for a living is going to look at this. They're not going to look at it emotionally. Whereas
they're going to be more objective than you are. Yeah.
Right, regardless of what, I'm a pretty practical guy. But even then, even being a practical guy, when my sales have dropped from $20,000 a day to zero, it's very hard for me to be objective. So, that's one of the things is that's what these professional services are for. It's not, it's not, can you do this yourself? It's, do you have the time to do it yourself? That's the thing is, time for us, time's money. You mentioned why you could use professional services. And I want to chime in with why I would.
I mean, here's something that's interesting is one of the smartest guys I know doesn't write very well. He doesn't communicate very well in written word. When I've read his writing before, I wasn't sure how smart he was. You know, I didn't think anything special of his ability to communicate in a written way, right? It wasn't, if he was writing his plan of action to Amazon, I'm not sure he'd be able to be successful because of his writing skills. Not because he's not smart enough, because he's certainly smart enough. And I don't know what to chalk that up to. I don't hold that against him. I still think he's one of the smartest guys I know. But in his case, I'd say, yeah, you probably ought to have somebody review that for you.
Absolutely.
And you know, I'm not even saying, hey, I'm the best writer in the world. I just know that I can communicate better than he can, at least in terms of, you know, comparison for communication in that way.
And you have, that's the other thing, is you actually have knowledge about what Amazon wants to see there.
That's a big deal. It really is. It's not like you're just paying for somebody's time. You're paying for their expertise, for their skills, their knowledge, their background, their number of things that they see, the number of times they see these same things, what's worked in the past. Again, I really think the ideal scenario is for you as a seller to fix it on your own. It's just if you can't or you're afraid to, if there's too much at risk, then maybe it makes sense to reach out to somebody else. So here's something I'm dealing with right now with a plan of action for one of the clients who's suspended. And one of the problems that they have is, hey, I can write a pretty decent plan of action for this guy, but his invoices are horrible. His invoices might be the sticking point for him to not be able to be reinstated. The plan of action will be fine. I'll do my job the way it needs to be done, but I can't make up a fake invoice for him that Amazon will accept. So it makes the hoops that you have to jump through that much more challenging because his invoices aren't good or non-existent. And so just like I think it's so important for you to be authorized to sell every product you sell, it's important for you to have really good invoices that show that you're the buyer, this is what you purchased, that the information that's on there from the seller, from the manufacturer, vendor, whatever, has all of their information on there. It has their email address, their phone number, their website, your contact there, an address that can be verified, and it has all the same things for you as a seller. And I see so many sellers mess this up. So on your account, it might say your name, but somewhere else it says your legal name, and maybe somewhere else it says your business name, and somewhere else it says your Amazon store name. Well, you need to really consolidate all that because you need to make it as easy as possible for people who are doing enforcement investigation to say, hey, Dan, you're Dan, and hey, your invoice says Dan, and your phone number is the same one that's on your Amazon seller account, your address is the same one that's on your Amazon seller account, and your email address is the same one that you use to log into Seller Central. If you have all that on your invoice, it makes it so much easier.
Right. I mean, that's the thing with, you know, and that goes with getting ungated too. The more you can make if you can make your invoices match your seller account, you are going to be more successful in getting ungated. Like it's going to be easier to get ungated for products.
It's easier to get ungated. It's easier to get reinstated. It's easier to defend yourself in an IP rights issue. All that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. So, do you have anything else on your document?
I'm double checking. Oh, this is sort of unrelated, but I had somebody ask me today, and they said, hey, I've got these 3 negative seller feedbacks on my account. They're from over 6 months ago. Can you take a look at them? Do you think you'd be able to help me? And the answer is maybe, because it's gotten a lot more difficult. Amazon is making it far more difficult to get feedback removed that they used to either remove or they used to remove automatically. And so the time frame doesn't really matter as much. Do they have to have a button on their account that they can see where the buyer can go in and remove feedback? And the answer is no, they don't have to have that button. But it's getting more and more difficult to get feedback removed. And so if you are trying to get that done, maybe you've been unsuccessful on your own, I really need to see the text of that feedback, because sometimes it's a matter of there might be some sort of obscure contingency that allows us to make a decent argument for why it should be removed. But more and more, I'm seeing that the only way that you can get some feedback removed is to contact the buyer directly.
Yeah. No, I mean, we've noticed that too. We had never had a negative feedback that had stuck until a couple months ago. And there's a couple of them we just can't get removed. It's the 3-star okay. Like Amazon just doesn't remove those anymore. It's very tough. It's, you might get lucky and get one removed every now and then, but it's not commonplace anymore.
I can get those removed regularly if it says okay or if it says good and it's 3-star or 2-star or 1-star. I can get those removed, but the only way for me to really do it is when you have a whole lot at once.
Oh, interesting. I mean, I guess I'll just stock them up.
Well, a whole lot of all kinds of feedback at once, not just all your okays and goods.
Okay. Now, for what it's worth, if you guys ever have feedback-related questions, Scott's the man. Scott's the man to ask. How many feedback have you removed in your day, Scott? We're talking thousands.
I had one client who had 1,500 to have removed, 1,500 negatives.
Oh, wow.
So I did that over a period of like 6 months. Actually, it was a year of 1 month at a time removing those 1,500 negatives. So that's just one client, I mean, it's just thousands upon thousands for sure. And the thing that I think is important for you to know as a seller is that almost invariably that negative feedback is a symptom of something that's wrong with your account that you need to fix. Yeah. So if you are continuing to see various different types of feedback, the most important thing for you to do is not get it removed. It's to fix the problem that's causing that.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the thing is most customers, what we've learned is whenever a customer complains and leaves a negative feedback, if it's one that's tough to actually get off there, or if it is there's nothing you can do obviously about the Amazon messed up the shipment, they received it 10 days late or what have you. I mean, those aren't your fault. But if it's related to the condition of the product, a lot of the time that's your fault. Like you didn't properly prep that product, and you should probably look at your prep for that entire line. I mean, that's an indicator. Like when we get a feedback, there's certain code words that we care about in our feedback. Is if somebody says that they received the wrong item, like that's the first thing we do is that we go close the listing, and that was one of Elisa's question. You can I'll answer that one. But when you go to manage inventory and you can push close listing, and it just won't be available. And you can, then after you do that, then research the issue. Don't leave it up while you're researching the issue, even if you only got a couple items left. There's a problem, deal with it, unless and by leaving things up. I mean, I feel like that's where a lot of people make the mistake is they're like, I only have 1 or 2 of these. And that's the problem. That's a problem. If you have 1 or 2 more mistakes, that can cause you to get suspended. So, whenever you do that, if you run into that kind of problem, go to manage inventory and close that listing. That way, it's you're not going to pick up extra strikes.
Right. Here's the other mistake I see people make a lot, and that is they get a performance notification, and then they delete the listing, and they say, "Oh, I don't want to sell it again." That's not good enough. You still need to respond to Amazon and let them know what you're doing a lot of the time.
Right. I mean, Amazon wants to see that you're proactively. Whether you're going to sell that product again, it's not about that product. It's about your ability to deliver an awesome experience to their customers.
And deleting the product doesn't fix it.
Right. That just means for whatever reason you're not selling it again. But if you're not actually fixing the problem or showing Amazon that you pay attention to that problem, that's when you get yourself in trouble.
Yeah, that's right. You still need to be able to communicate to Amazon clearly, this is what caused the problem for that product. This is what we would do to fix it if we were still carrying it. This is what we have done to fix it so that we can continue to sell it. Something along those lines. You have to identify that you understand the root cause and what you could do to prevent it in the future, even if it's a product you no longer want to sell.
Yep, absolutely. Well, before we hop off here, we have one more question that we'll take. and she just wanted to know if that email template to the brand owner is in the file section. For what it's worth, whenever I said we had a template for that, I thought you were talking about the case with Amazon. So I'd love to get yours and be able to share that with our people.
Right. Yeah, it's just sort of the standard template. Oh, that actually brings to mind something else. This is sort of the standard template that I would give you if you told me you had an IP rights owner complaint and you need to get a hold of that rights owner, right? So that's what this is. But the other thing I would say is I've seen this happen multiple times. I know specifically a couple of different clients who were suspended. Then they tried to use a template that somebody else had used. And this, the template that I saw one person use recently, that it didn't work for them. They remained suspended. The person who helped them was part of a known group. People would consider that you should go to this person and that or these people, and that they're professionals and that they're the people that you should go to if you need help. And the issue is that this guy tried to use a template to get reinstated, and I took a look at it and I said, well, it's a nice template. It would work for some people in certain situations, but it doesn't have anything to do with fixing your problems. I can see why they didn't reinstate you. It's plain as day.
Sure.
You need to write something that's specific to you.
Culinars is a template. For what it's worth, I don't know if you've seen it. Culinars, a template is actually strong. It's definitely more of an outline.
Sure.
It says address root cause.
Yeah.
Acknowledge the actual problem, and then give a plan of action with 4 specific points.
Pretty much. I mean, that's kind of my approach for almost every case. What's the root cause? What have I done to fix it? What am I going to do to prevent it from happening again?
Yep.
That's my template.
That's our template too.
Yeah. Every case is different. Every single one. So don't try to take somebody else's situation and apply it to your own. So
I guess before we hop off here, Scott, can you tell me your top 3 tips for maintaining your Amazon account to make sure that you don't run into these issues? Because I think the best medicine is preventative.
Absolutely.
Be proactive and be preventative. So what would you say are the top 3 things you would look at to prevent yourself from getting suspended?
Right. Well, thank you for that opportunity. And, I mean, really, that's why I'm doing the webinar today.
Sure.
I want people to be proactive. That's the only way you're going to be successful. I want you to prevent these things from happening to your account.
It's funny. I think it's kind of funny that being proactive and taking action is kind of the cure in almost every situation. Like you want to get a bigger, better business, take action. You want to prevent your account from being suspended, take action. Like if you're taking action and you're doing the right things, like you get rewarded. That's just the way it works. And with this, I think it's the same thing. I'm actually excited to hear your answer on here. But
I definitely agree. I mean, there is no such thing as passivity on Amazon. Amazon wants sellers to be operating with as close to perfection as possible. That means that you need to have excellence in every single area, and there aren't any shortcuts to excellence. So, I mean, the first thing, the easiest thing, the most obvious thing to me is make sure you're approved to sell every single product you sell. That's a huge wake-up call for people who are doing RA and OA, for people who are doing liquidations and closeouts and all that sort of thing.
I think closeouts are scary nowadays, for what it's worth.
Way scary. I can't tell you how many suspensions I've seen for people selling health and personal care, beauty, and grocery that were closeouts.
Nope.
And it comes down to other things as well. And I wouldn't put this necessarily as the top 3, but if you're guilty of it, you're just sitting there with a bullseye on your back, and that is not having a process in place to make sure that you check and have specific, procedures to make sure that you check all dates for things with expiration dates. If you've got any kind of issues whatsoever with expiration dates, you don't know how to check a batch code for cosmetics, or you aren't following Amazon's TOS to a T, if you're not making sure that you have a way that you send in and track every single shipment that you send to FBA that has a specific expiration date, you're just trouble waiting to happen. Again, I wouldn't say that that's in the top 3, but it's certainly danger, danger, danger. You know, you're going to be in some sort of dire consideration if you don't have a handle on that. And another thing along those lines I would say would be making sure that your product is an exact match in every way against the product detail page. It's so obvious. If you don't have that exact match, and if you're not checking ACE and change notifications, you're asking for trouble. And another issue along those lines, and I hate to make this more than 3, but you got to be doing all of these things. That's why excellence is so critical. You can't just do it halfway, and all the boring, unsexy, monotonous things that need to happen on a regular basis on your account need to happen. It's like changing the oil in your truck. It's like making sure your tires are in good condition. Do you put your baby in the back seat and don't strap them in? Do you put your baby in the back seat and have crappy tires? You just don't do it.
Right. I mean, I think that's excellent. So you would say get approved, make sure you check your dates, review products and listings, and then just do everything. Do everything you're supposed to do. Like, I mean, it sounds that last part sounds crazy, but it's true. Like, and what he's talking about is he's talking about the unsexy stuff, like the stuff that you're talking about, deleting listings and checking every time you get a change notification email. You should do these things. You should 100% absolutely do those things. Man, I can't thank you enough. This has been so informative, Scott.
Check all your account metrics daily.
Yeah.
If you get suspended, you have to be perfect. I mean, perfect for the next 6 months. You pretty well needed to be perfect before that, but if you get suspended, it's got to be even more so. In fact, a lot of the time I tell people, suppress or close every single product in your inventory until you are absolutely certain that there would be no problems of any kind with any of them.
Absolutely, man. And if anybody wants to ask Scott questions, Scott's an active member of the community. He's in there posting all the time. And then you can also catch up with Scott at feedbackrepair.com. And how can they send you an email? I imagine all your contact information on the website, right?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I've got several ways you can contact me that are on the website, or email is scott@feedbackrepair.com. I got to say, you guys have a great group. I love what you're doing. You've got great content. What you're doing is very helpful. The group that you have and the messages that are in your Facebook groups are some of the best out there on anywhere on Facebook. So, I applaud you for that, and it's, I think, very helpful for your people who are, part of your membership. Just you got to keep that up, obviously.
Absolutely. Thank you, brother. And like I said, what you do in there doesn't go unnoticed. People notice how helpful you are. And whenever you do that, whenever you're willing to just give complete value, I mean, that's what you do. You just get in there and you give back value all the time. It comes back in rewards. Like, I think you're, an unbelievable guy and awesome. I'm proud to know you.
All right. This replay will go up probably tomorrow, and I'll get you the replay too so that you can throw it up.
I appreciate it. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks a ton, Scott.
All right. Take care.